Alrighty, welcome back to another episode of Two Plain Sports. I want to make sure I'm not muted like I was the entire episode last time. As you guys can see, we've got OU insider Parker Thune joining us. Thanks for coming back. I think this is number 3 or 4 that you've been joining us.
Yeah, Phil's not a problem at all. I got to ask, Two-Plane, where does that name come from?
It's long story short, us and then our buddy Brandon that's usually with us. We're drinking and essentially decided that the optimal way to build a football team is to just have the heaviest and biggest dudes in the trenches, and you would need 2 planes to transport them back and forth to away games.
So there you go. Okay. I mean, hey, it tracks. It makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't know what we
A
were
bit of
going
an
to name
inside
the thing.
joke, but
Yeah, inside joke for sure. We didn't know what we were going to name it, so we were just like, you know what? Let's just keep it something we think is funny, and if someone asks, maybe they'll think it's funny someday.
And games are won and lost in the trenches.
that is true. Can't dispute that. We've seen that time and time again.
Yes, we have. So, I mean, we're going to be talking a lot about recruiting. We'll talk about a little bit about the wide receiver coach situation, where everything is moving on that, because it's a big topic and could potentially decide some decisions for either guys returning or potential commits down the road. Before we get it started on all that, as always, we appreciate you guys for watching. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, like, comment, let us know what you think. If you guys are in the live chat right now during the premiere, make sure to go in the comment section. Just let us know what your thoughts as well, because that helps us out a little bit more. But let's go ahead and get started. Let's kick it off with the wide receiver coach situation. We've talked about it a couple of times on our channel. From our perspective, it seems like it's something that would probably be better to get done sooner rather than later. I know Samples has been a name that's been out there for the last week or so, but LD Washington is still there, and he's been recruiting pretty well.
He has been, but at the same time, I think what a lot of fans are somewhat, what's the right word? Unsettled by is the play of the wide receivers to this point in the season for Oklahoma, and some crucial drops from guys like Marvin Mims and Jalil Farouk. And look, at the end of the day, I don't think the fault falls on LD Washington for that. Wide receivers catch the ball, or at least they should, right? You shouldn't have to teach a guy to catch a football when that's what he's been doing all his life. So I don't find LD Washington culpable as far as that's concerned. But naturally, he's become kind of the scapegoat for the inconsistent play of the wideouts. And so a lot of the fans have been clamoring for a permanent option and a high profile option. I think the guy at the top of every wish list was Malcolm Kelly. Well, as the week has progressed, the intel suggests, and all the more so suggests over the last few days, that he is not going to end up on staff at Oklahoma. And so there are a few names that you keep in mind if Malcolm Kelly is out of the picture. And obviously Rashad Samples, I think, is first and foremost the name that everybody should know, because he is a dynamic recruiter. And when I say dynamic, I truly mean it. There may not be 5 recruiters in college football with more sheer ability in that capacity than Rashad Samples. He's currently the running backs coach for the LA Rams. It feels like that's going to be a one and done type of deal for him. I thought it was bizarre when he made the jump to the NFL in the first place, just because of how good at recruiting he is. And also because it seemed like a weird fit, all things considered, and it hasn't paid off for him in LA. And I think the expectation is that he's going to head back to the collegiate level and end up coaching wide receivers, which is the position that he played at some point this offseason. It's just a matter of where he lands. Now, if Oklahoma can get a guy like Samples on staff, they're going to make some hay on the recruiting trail in the state of Texas at the end of the 2023 cycle, and certainly in the 2024 cycle, because like I said, I don't know if there are many recruiters nationwide that are better than Rashad Samples when you just talk about pure recruiting ability. And certainly when it comes to the state of Texas, there aren't many guys that would have the capacity to own that state with the OU logo on their hat and on their polo than Rashad Samples. So I think that's a home run hire if that ends up happening. If it doesn't end up happening, the 2 names that I would know or get to know are Jeff Scott, former USF head coach, has some familiarity with Brent Venables dating back to the Clemson days, and Daryl Wyatt, who's currently coaching wideouts at Boston College. He's been around, but there's some familiarity there as well. And that's a hire that I could see coming to fruition. But I think if you're Oklahoma at this point, Samples has to be the top priority. And from what I've heard behind the scenes, he is the guy that they want the most. It's just a matter of being able to execute the negotiations, figure out an exit path from his NFL job, and also outbid some of the other schools that are going to be in play for Sample services.
That's definitely fair. And in our Wednesday's video, we actually kind of talked about the whole LD Washington thing. And I actually used the same phrase as he's kind of the scapegoat in this scenario with, how the offense is performed and all, and everyone's been frustrated with Jeff Levy, and they're looking for someone who's the problem that they can get rid of. And because a guy has the interim title, he seems to be an easy target. I do think he's still critical to the staff, and it should be a priority to retain in some capacity. It does get a little awkward per se if you are the interim wide receivers coach and they kind of send you down maybe to a defensive analyst of some sort back to where he was before. But if you pay enough, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. The guy's going to be happy with what he gets. So I feel bad for LD Washington. And the whole other component of it is you're bringing in another wide receivers coach for these guys that are already on the roster. And I would just like to see them make a decision soon, one way or another, whether it's LD, whether it's Rashad Samples, Jeff Scott, or anyone else. Do you think they make or are able to get the decision made before early National Signing Day?
I think there's a world in which that happens, but to be honest, I'm not sure if that's as big of a deal as many are making it out to be, because you have two wide receivers in the class right now that are solidly committed in Jaquays Petaway and Keon Brown. And the third guy that you're pursuing at the position, Micah Tease, it's not going to come down to who's the wide receiver coach for that kid. That is going to be water under the bridge. If he can get past the fact that the Sooners didn't recruit him at wide receiver for the longest time, denied the opportunity to recruit him a wide receiver for the longest time, then I feel he's going to be a Sooner. And I've said it really ever since Anthony Evans decommitted. I think Micah Tease ends up in this class at the end of the day. And whether or not it's LD Washington or Rashad Samples or Jeff Scott or Daryl Wyatt or one of y'all that's the wide receiver coach next year, I don't think that's going to hold Micah Tease back or impact his perspective on the situation at the University of Oklahoma. So I'm not really sure whether it's the type of thing where you need to be too worried about what the timetable is, just because there's really not a whole lot at stake in this class for Oklahoma as far as that's concerned. You got Petaway, you got Brown, they're in the boat regardless. And it's not going to impact where they stand with Tease, regardless of who is the coach of record at the wide receiver position whenever National Signing Day rolls around.
That's fair. And I think that's a lot of information on the wide receivers coach. Let's shift over to the 23 class, because we do have early National Signing Day coming up here in less than a month. Before I get into any individual target or player that's already committed, I've only been following recruiting for maybe 2.5 cycles, 3 cycles as a whole. Do you think this is the most, maybe not hyped up, but the one that's getting fans the most excited in recent history? With Jackson Arnold coming in, people are kind of already saying this guy can be QB1 day one. Potentially a Peyton Bowen joining. He could be a day one contributor. A lot of these guys are already being said as guys that could contribute from the moment they get to campus.
Yeah, I think this is probably the first time since the 2019 class that there's been this much excitement about what this group is going to bring to Oklahoma. And when you look back at that 2019 class, man, it's kind of a wasteland in retrospect, because so many of those guys have transferred out or just straight up not panned out. It was Spencer Rattler, Theo Weiss, Austin Stogner, Trajan Bridges, Jaden Hazelwood that headlined that class. Obviously, all 5 of those guys have now departed. And you look further down the list, there are guys like Derek Green that never made it to campus, guys like Jonathan Perkins and Ty DeArmond that were in and out. within a semester. And you got a couple hits among the misses. Woody Washington has certainly turned out to be one heck of a football player at Oklahoma. Ramondre Stevenson's making a name for himself in the NFL. So it wasn't all bad. But the 2019 class, the evaluations and the development that those guys experienced at Oklahoma for the most part really hung them out to dry. I don't think that's going to be the case with this 2023 class. I look top to bottom. There are a lot of these guys, a lot of players in this class that if they're developed properly and if they keep their heads screwed on straight, which I think the sole mission and the leadership across this coaching staff is going to help with, if these guys keep the main thing, to quote Jalen Hurts, there are plenty of them that are going to end up being big-time college football players at the University of Oklahoma. And so, yeah, this is a class to get legit excited about. And if you can cap it off by scoring any or all of Peyton Bowen, Cecilia Kana, DJ Hicks, Damian Sanford, Jordan Allen, Eno Etta, how about that one? And maybe somebody like CJ Blocker, then you just get all the more excited about a class that at that point could be a top 3 class nationally. And if you get a top 3 class nationally, that's never been done in the modern recruiting era at Oklahoma. The Sooners have never had a top 3 class going all the way back to the beginning of the Stoops era a quarter century ago. So that's uncharted territory. And the fact that that's what you have the opportunity to do as a program coming off a 6-6 season, man, it's not sunshine pumping and it's not sugarcoating to say that that should leave you very optimistic about what this coaching staff is going to do down the line.
And with the thought of, losing Colton Bosick and then also Anthony Evans, and you still have the opportunity to do that despite those decommitments. And you mentioned a guy, Eno Etta. This name has popped up recently. He visited for Oklahoma State. Seems like a lot of people have been talking about him. A lot of momentum is coming out with him. He visited. He's currently committed to Michigan, 2023 4-star defensive lineman from Colleyville, Texas. What's your sense? I assume, I don't know for sure, but I assume that Oklahoma will be doing an in-home visit with him at some point. And getting to know him even more and trying to convince his family, because they've just kind of came into this recruitment. It seems somewhat late. What do you think the possibilities? What are you hearing? What's your take on Etta?
I think that thing is very much in its infancy. And he only visited OU for the first time at Bedlam back on November 19th. So like you said, this is all very fresh. And if it's going to happen, it's going to happen fast, naturally, because we're only 3 weeks away from early signing day. I will say this. Collins Achampong, who is Etta's best friend, 4-star athlete from the state of California, just flipped from Michigan to Miami a couple days ago. And that moved the needle substantially in Etta's recruitment. And that's really the point at which I started to put out feelers and try to gauge whether OU felt like they had a shot in this thing based on the way that things were trending in the immediate aftermath of Achampong's flip. And so Miami is very heavily involved as well because they're trying to work that connection. I would figure that if Etta opens this thing back up, OU and Miami are probably the 2 schools that have positioned themselves better than any. Now, I don't know that he opens it back up. He may stay committed to Michigan and he may put pen to paper for the Wolverines. But if at any point he decommits and he is back on the open market and you're a Sooner fan, that is a recruitment you're going to want to start paying attention to.
That'll just help bolster up that defensive line group, right? I mean, that's something that a lot of fans were worried about not that long ago after Bosick decided to flip to Texas. It seemed like, the sky was falling on Oklahoma again, like it was last November when Lincoln Riley left. We're now in with Etta, potentially back in. It sounds like we're back in with Hicks. Who knows how much that'll change. And I know that brings up a lot of bad feelings for Sooner fans. Something that's been a question with Hicks is, does his best friend Damian Sanford need to be part of that situation for Oklahoma to actually get him to campus and
Yes.
enroll?
Yes, he does. I think those two are going somewhere together. I find it very hard to believe they end up parting ways. So either they both flip from Texas A&M or neither of them flip from Texas A&M. That's what I feel as of now, because they are very, very close. And you don't need to look any further for evidence of that than the fact that every school that has ramped up their pursuit of DJ Hicks since he committed to Texas A&M has also taken the time to go and offer and heavily recruit Damian Sanford. They realize how special that connection is between those two and how much it means to each of them. So, yeah, if Oklahoma is going to flip DJ Hicks, they're going to have to flip Damian Sanford too.
So continuing with that, do you get the feeling that if it was up to Hicks and Sanford was not involved in this, do you think that would change where he's committed right now? Or do you think Hicks is having second thoughts, or do you think it's Sanford that's not totally sold because he got offered late after Caleb Spencer decommitted, then he got offered? Do you feel like maybe if OU would have offered Sanford earlier in the cycle, OU might not be in this position?
Yes and no. I think it has less to do with not being sold on Oklahoma and more to do with not being sold on Texas A&M right now. Because how can you be sold on the situation down in College Station right now? They just went 5-7. You're seeing a portal exodus. They have the number 24 class in America right now. And if you remove Hicks and Sanford from the equation, they have the number 50 class in America. They just fired their offensive coordinator, who was Jimbo Fisher's puppet anyway. There's a lot of dissension down there in Aggie land. And so you can't feel great about that situation if you're committed to Texas A&M right now. Not to say that it's automatically compelling you to look elsewhere, but man, you've got to have some healthy concern for the future of that program if you're looking at things objectively. So I think it more comes down to the fact that Oklahoma is the most viable alternative for DJ Hicks. And once OU made that offer to Sanford and invited him up for that official visit, I think it kind of has become an OU A&M battle down the stretch, because I don't think it's any particular secret that DJ Hicks favored Oklahoma over A&M. He did. And one thing leads to another, and he commits to the Aggies. But the love is there for Oklahoma and DJ Hicks's mind. It's just a matter of not only selling Sanford, but figuring out how you can get those two to make that move in conjunction, right? So it'll be an interesting final 3 weeks. I really hope this thing doesn't last past early signing day. So I would figure we have a resolution by the time December 21st rolls around. And there hopefully won't be a whole lot of questions left to answer for Oklahoma between early signing day in December and national signing day in February.
Moving on to another guy, Akana. That's one of the guys that we talked about the first time that you joined us on the show back in the summer. You said that at the time it seemed like because Brent Venables was his main recruiter, his main contact with Oklahoma was potentially the school to beat. Is that still the feeling with Akana and with in-homes coming up? How does that kind of mold his recruitment? Because from what I understood when watching your live stream with Drum on Wednesdays, which if you guys don't, make sure to check it out. Not sure if it's going to happen during the off season, but every Wednesday they give a lot of good information. So check that out. Will Akana be in Utah? Will it make it harder if it does end up being in Hawaii?
So I don't know. Don't know with 100% certainty, but will it be a problem either way? No, it won't, because OU will go the extra mile for that kid. Brent Venables has gone the extra mile for that kid. And that's the reason why I've always felt confident in OU and Cecilia Akana. There's a lot of confidence within the walls of the Switzer Center that they are poised to close on him. And I'll rehash some of what I said on our most recent live stream, which is depending on who you talk to in this recruitment, you're going to get different vibes. There are some that will say it's a battle between OU and LSU. There are some that will say it's a battle between OU and Texas. Some will tell you OU, Texas A&M, and some will tell you it's a three-way race between OU and Tennessee and Utah. But there's a common denominator, right? OU is the common denominator across all of those various sourced rumblings. And so as I evaluate what makes the most sense and what you can reasonably glean reading between the lines for a kid who keeps things as close to the vest as Akana does. Oh, you hear a lot about Akana and OU for a reason. And if you follow Akana on Instagram, he gives a ton of love to OU commits, current OU players. He's very close with Dylan Gabriel. You talk about the Hawaii pipeline. That's real. Not only his relationship with Dylan Gabriel, but also his relationship with Jocelyn Alo and her family, if you can believe that. So I feel really good about where OU stands with Tassili Akana. I know OU feels really good about where they stand with Tassili Akana. So, yeah, I think he ends up in this class as well as things stand today.
Is he expected is he expected to sign in December? Or is that one that could last all the way up to February?
Again, I hope all these guys sign in December. And I think we're trending in that direction because especially with the portal now in play, guys are going to want to lock in their spots and make sure they don't get left out in the cold by their school of choice. And so if anybody who has their mind made up by December 21st, I would expect will sign on December 21st. And so I would figure 80 to 85% of this class is locked down for good within 3 weeks here.
And that was my exact question. It's just, it would be nice, whether he signs with Oklahoma or not, it would just be nice to have be able to turn the page. And it seemed like the common denominator is there for Tassili Akana, and I think he'd be a huge addition, especially losing Colton Vasek. It just makes Akana that much more important. And I know this is one of our favorite guys to talk about on our show, and I'm sure with you as well, because you probably get badgered about it all the time. Peyton Bowen. Peyton Bowen, I mean, he's been flirting with Oklahoma since he committed to Notre Dame, since the new staff came on campus. 2023 5-star from Denton Geyer, best friends with Jackson Arnold, girlfriend going to play soccer at OU. He's supposed to commit months ago, and it just keeps getting flip, and he's supposed to do this and that, and it just keeps getting pushed back. Do you see him making some official statement and letting everyone know one way or another wherever he's going before National Signing Day? Or is he going to be the type of guy that's going to just throw a hat on and sign the dotted line, and then you just won't know until he signs?
Yeah, look, I've been asked this question umpteen times over the last 3-4 months, and I'll give you the same answer I've given everybody else. I don't know, and I'm not going to sit here and act like I do. I don't think anybody knows what the timetable looks like for that kid. And it may there is some buzz that a decision is coming within the next few days here. But if I had a nickel for every time there had been buzz that a decision was coming the next few days, I'd have filled up a couple piggy banks by now. So I'm not 100% buying that. It may last until National Signing Day. It may just as well be wrapped up in the next 48, 72 hours. Who the heck knows at this point? I don't. All I know is that I trust my intuition. I trust the folks that I've talked to that know the ins and outs of that recruitment and have a reliable beat and an objective view of everything that goes on in and around Denton Geyer. And if you talk to anybody that spends time around that school, spends time around Peyton Bowen, really knows what they're talking about in the DFW scene, they'll tell you the exact same thing, man. It's going to end up being OU for Bowen. And that's been my feeling for months at this point. That continues to be my feeling here as we sit 3 weeks away from signing day. And I know Notre Dame fans do not like me because I've never really hedged on this. I think Peyton Bowen's a Sooner in the end. And that's where I will continue to stand. And I've gotten to the point where I've started to feel even better about this as we get closer and closer to decision day. Pen to paper day, as it were. I'm starting to feel even better about this than I did previously. I think everything is firmly trending in the direction of Peyton Bowen flipping to Oklahoma. And I'm not the only one that's expressed that either. You talk to anybody across the industry, there's that sentiment is beginning to prevail more and more. And I don't think it's going to come as a surprise to anybody if at some point Peyton Bowen is no longer committed to the University of Notre Dame and he is in fact committed to the University of Oklahoma.
Yeah, and I'm sure if this lasts up until that 21st date, you might be able to retire if you got a nickel every time you got that question asked.
Oh boy. Oh boy. It's almost over. It's almost over.
Yes. So with the 23 class almost wrapping up and like you said, potentially completely being done by the time the 21st comes around, do you think 24 kids are going to start to be committing verbally or at least announcing that verbal commitment publicly come the end of December, January, start getting that recruitment rolling for the Sooners?
I would say January is when you start to see it pop. Sooners are having a big junior day, couple of big junior days that month. And so it's not out of the question that somebody commits out of the blue in December and gets the ball rolling for Oklahoma, but I would kind of peg January as the rough timetable on when things get rolling in the 2024 class. And I do think for OU, the ball's going to get rolling a lot faster and a lot earlier than it did in the 2023 class. I think come this past June, Oklahoma only had 4 commits, if my memory serves me correctly. I will venture a guess they have a lot more than 4 commits come June of next year, because I think once one guy jumps in the boat, you're going to see others follow. And I particularly would focus on that northeast side of the DFW Metroplex, places like Lovejoy, McKinney, Forney, Melissa. I'm thinking about guys like Nigel Smith, Michael Hawkins, Zena Amozalu, Peyton Pierce, Parker Livingstone, if he ends up with an OU offer, Xavier Filsamy, Aaron Flowers. There are so many players on that northeast side of DFW that OU has really begun to trend heavily for in the 2024 class that I can see OU just building a fence there. And I can also see a lot of those commitments coming in rapid succession because these guys all know each other. They all respect each other. They all have good relationships with one another. And they all have that shared affinity for the University of Oklahoma. And that's why I truly do believe that this winter and spring, January, February, March, you will see a lot more commitments early in the process for OU this time around than you did this past year.
And it also kind of hammers in why Rashad Samples would be such a big addition, because Oklahoma's already making great headway with all these DFW area targets. And you add him into this equation, it brings you up that much, brings you that much further along. I have one last 2023 kid to ask about, is Jordan Allen. He's another kid that is kind of came out of the blue, committed to Kansas State from Olathe, Kansas, 3-star edge player, but he's a versatile guy. Where he's going to play, I don't know, is it tight end, defensive end, wherever he can get on the field, probably. Is there a legitimate buzz around him? Is he locked in with Kansas State? What do you think about him?
Here's the best way I can put it with regard to Jordan Allen. He's a very quiet kid. He's very reserved, not super forthcoming with the details of his recruitment. Kansas State is a fit that makes a lot of sense for him. But there's a quiet confidence right now around the Switzer Center that Allen ends up signing with Oklahoma. And I would figure this is the type of deal. What's a good comparison? Jaron Kanik is a good comparison. Not an exact comparison, but I think it's a good comparison. I think if Jordan Allen flips to Oklahoma, it's not something that becomes a big public spectacle. I think it's something that happens on National Signing Day. I think he's committed to Kansas State. He's committed to Kansas State. He's committed to Kansas State. December 21st rolls around. Boom. He signs with Oklahoma. It's going to be that type of deal if the flip happens. And I'm not saying it does. I'm not saying get your hopes up. But what I am saying is right now, within the OU circle, there is a quiet confidence that Jordan Allen ends up a member of this class. So don't expect a whole lot of buzz. Don't expect a whole lot of updates over the last 3 weeks of this cycle leading up to early signing day. But I wouldn't be shocked. I would not be shocked at all if Jordan Allen ends up a Sooner.
So I still want to focus on the 24 class because there's a guy that just top of mind, David Stone. Seems like a guy that was always trending Oklahoma. At one point, it seemed like it was a foregone conclusion. It was just a matter of when, not if. Michigan State's really working hard to make sure that doesn't happen. Mel Tucker's doing everything he can to really start poaching guys out of that are local to Oklahoma City, took by Job in the 23 class. And I know he wasn't a lifelong Sooner fan like a David Stone, but do you think that that's a legit thing where Michigan State's gonna poach a guy that for a long time was trending Oklahoma?
Man, OU's got a golden opportunity here in the class of 2024 to make a massive statement because they got and I don't think I'm being hyperbolic when I say they were essentially gifted a beautiful situation with the top 2 defensive linemen in the nation, Williams Nwaneri and David Stone. Because as you mentioned, David Stone's a lifelong Sooner fan from Del City. I still firmly believe it's going to be Oklahoma at the end of the day for him, regardless of what smoke you're going to see for Michigan State and whatever other schools remain involved. I think it's OU in the end for him. You look at Williams Nwaneri and the situation there. That is the number 3 overall player in the nation, according to 24/7 Sports, in the class of 2024, regardless of position. The nation's top defensive lineman and number 3 overall player. Where does he play his high school football? He plays at Lee's Summit North on the southeast side of Kansas City. He's teammates with Caden Green, Oklahoma's 4-star offensive line commit in the class of 2023. His coach is former Oklahoma running back Jamar Mosey. There is a lot of pro-OU influence in Williams Nwaneri's circle. And so those feel like 2 recruitments. And it's not often you can say this about 5-star kids, but it feels like those are 2 recruitments that OU should be able to close out. If Todd Bates and Miguel Chavis continue to work fervently towards locking down those 2, those are battles they should be able to win. And that would be remarkable. If you could land the top 2 defensive linemen in the class of 2024 and establish a foundation for your defensive class with those 2 dudes, because they are special football players, man. I've gotten the chance to watch both of them in person multiple times, and they are 5 stars. It's not hard to see it. And that would be a fantastic way to kick off the 2024 class on the defensive side of the ball for Oklahoma, because I think those are also 2 guys that could commit early in the process. They don't love they don't love the back and forth, the headache of recruiting. And so those are 2 dudes that I can foresee locking things in early in the process. And I would consider Oklahoma absolutely the leader for David Stone as things stand right now. And I would consider them the leader for Williams Nwaneri as well. Maybe not by as significant of a margin, but again, you talk about how many people are in Williams Nwaneri's circle that are going to want to see him playing ball at the University of Oklahoma. That's really something that you can get excited about as a Sooner fan, is the very legitimate possibility that you could have the nation's top 2 defensive linemen in your class, and in your class early.
And I have a question about a 24 guy along the defensive line is T.A. Cunningham. It seemed like that a while ago, it seems like ages ago, that there was a ton of momentum. And he obviously went out to Los Alamitos in California, transferred out there. It seems like the buzz has kind of died down. Would you say that ship has sailed at this point? And it seems like Oklahoma might have identified Obviously the top two guys you were talking about, maybe a Nigel Smith along the defensive line as well. I mean, they seem to be Nzina Umuzilu. I think that's how you say his name. I struggle to say his name. It seems like they've got a plethora of options closer to them. What do you think?
And that's kind of why I tend to believe T.A. Cunningham doesn't end up in this class, is just because you can prioritize a defensive line nucleus that is within a much smaller radius from Norman, Oklahoma. You don't have to bother going to all the trouble of trying to recruit T.A. Cunningham out of USC's backyard in Los Alamitos, California. Not to say he ends up at USC, but you don't have to go to all the trouble of recruiting a kid out of LA when you can say, all right, we're going to make the 5-hour drive to Kansas City. We're going to snag Williams Nwaneri. We're going to make the 20-minute drive to Del City and see if we can wrap up David Stone. We're going to head 2 hours down the road to Melissa, and we're going to prioritize Nigel Smith. And while we're down there, we're just going to drive another 15 minutes, drop in on Zadavian Sims and Durant. And those are the 4 guys that we're going to build our class around on the defensive line. So T.A. Cunningham's a heck of a football player. And I don't think the line's going to go dead between him and Oklahoma. But if I'm the OU staff, and I would imagine that they're coming to this realization as I'd look at the way that things are evolving early on, as you'd start to look ahead to the 2024 cycle, I would figure that the guys that they prioritize are those 4 that I mentioned, and there may be others that emerge, but I do not figure that T.A. Cunningham is a guy that they're going to bend over backwards to try and get in Norman, because you have an elite core of defensive linemen, all top 100 guys, where you can draw a 300-mile circle around Norman, Oklahoma, and you don't have to leave that vicinity.
So I only have one more question. So if you have a couple more questions, Brum, go ahead and throw them out there.
Yeah, I was just coming back to this off season in the transfer portal. Are there any guys in the transfer portal or JUCO guys that Oklahoma you've heard that has identified, or there's some buzz around that they're interested in, or anything like that? I mean, considering the wide receiver, couple guys are gone from there. Potentially if Marvin Mims does decide to leave, offensive line, with a couple guys that are going to be going to the NFL and graduating. Do you have any names to watch?
So nobody's actually in the transfer portal right now, at least not the FBS level.
True.
And it's just, I think it's best practice and kind of my policy not to speculate on guys that might enter the transfer portal unless they've already announced that they're entering. So I think one guy that for whom Oklahoma was the runner-up a couple of years ago, a name worth filing away is Christian Leary, Alabama wideout, who just announced that he's entering the portal today. Oklahoma is in hot pursuit of Kyle Morlock, tight end, 6'7", 250-pound tight end out of Shorter University in Georgia, which is a Division II school. Nonetheless, Morlock is a guy that has shot onto the radar for a number of high-end Power 5 institutions. Oklahoma is not the only heavy hitter that's involved for him, but what's interesting is he has a relationship that dates back to 2018, I believe, with none other than J.R. Sandlin, Oklahoma's director of recruiting and player personnel, who had recruited him to Jacksonville State when he was on staff there. So Morlock is one guy to watch. If you're looking at the JUCO circuit, obviously Oklahoma already got a commitment from Kendall Dolby, JUCO All-American defensive back, and they're also very much in play for Keyshawn Blackstock as well, who's one of the top offensive line prospects in this JUCO cycle, excuse me. So Blackstock, definitely a name to know if you're looking at other JUCO guys. One other name I would throw out there, and I'm not sure how likely it is at this point, especially given that they seem to kind of be keying in on Morlock, but another tight end worth knowing is Owen Olson out of Tyler Junior College, who is a native of, he's from Oklahoma, and I can't remember exactly which school he went to. But regardless, those are the JUCO/portal names worth knowing right now, and there will be plenty more, especially after the portal officially opens on December 5th, and we know for sure who all's going to be in it.
So my last question is, with National Signing Day coming up, what is your guesstimate of how many high school recruits end up being in this class? I know Drum, whenever I watched Brandon's interview with Jackson, and their guesstimate was about 25. Do you think that's fair? Do you think it's actually going to be a little bit more now that we're closer to that day where these kids are putting pen to paper?
Oh, that's a good question. So they have 21, right? No, they have 22 right now. They have 22. So they have 23 total commits. Kendall Dolby's a JUCO guy. So you got 22 high school guys committed right now. Let me crunch the numbers in my head. I'm going to set the number at 27. I think the Sooners take 27 high school guys. And I think when you throw in Dolby, that gives you 28 in total. You maybe throw in a guy like Blackstock. That's gravy, right? But I believe the Sooners will take 27 high school guys.
It's a pretty solid class. Yeah, it's definitely.
You have anything else you wanted to add, bro?
No, I'm good. I feel like this is a great tons of information recruiting wise, and I just want to say we thank you for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. Never a problem, guys. Always a blast.
Thanks again, Parker. As I mentioned halfway through the video, if you guys don't watch the OU Insider live stream on Wednesdays, make sure you're tuning in. Go subscribe to their channel. I think you guys might be running a special on the OU Insider VIP stuff if you want to plug that real quick.
Yeah, we are 50% off at ouinsider.com, which is a service of the 24/7 Sports Network. So you can get a full year of VIP membership for just about $4 a month and change if you sign up by December 5th. So we talked about December 5th being the date that the portal window opens up. But if you sign up for OU Insider between now and then, you get it at 50% off for the first year. So $448 a month, I believe, is the final total, which you will pay for a full year of OU Insider VIP membership.
Awesome. Make sure, if you guys love recruiting just as much as we do, make sure you take advantage of that. Sure, they give you guys a lot of good information, so pop into that. As always, we appreciate all of you for watching. Make sure you hit the like, subscribe button, leave a comment. Let us know who you're most excited about potentially being in this class, either a guy that's already committed or that you hope commits in the next few weeks before National Signing Day. And make sure to thank Parker. Go follow him on Twitter. Follow him on his socials. We're going to put the links in the description, so it'll be easy access. We, again, appreciate you guys for watching. We'll see you next time.